Good morning, everyone. Good morning to Avon Fire Authority's meeting and annual general meeting. Today's date is Monday, the 30th of June, 2025, and we're in Weston-super-Mare Fire Station. The reason I'm opening this morning is just to give a quick explanation. So at the Fire Authority meeting on the 19th of March 2025, members appointed Councillor Paul Goggin as the Fire Authority Chair and Councillor Paul May as the Vice Chair. At those meetings, members indicated a willingness to extend those appointments to cover the new municipal year, and therefore I'm asking members this morning to re-elect the Chair and the Vice Chair today. So the first item of business, please, is the election of Chair for the municipal year. Please, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder for Councillor Paul Goggin? So Councillor Moss and Councillor Payne. Thank you. Votes in favour? Thank you very much. Carried. I hand over.
Thank you very much, and thank you to members as well. We now move on to, as Amanda said, we agreed to continue the Vice Chair, Councillor May. I don't think he's here today. So may I have a proposer? Rob? Okay, and may I have a seconder? Tom, thank you very much. And all votes in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Okay, so moving on to apologies for absence, we have a few. Councillors Kent, May, Murphy, Cronolly, Eddy, Saini, Stansfield, Williams, and also from James Mason, our independent person. So I'll move on to item 4, which is emergency evacuation procedures, and I'll pass to the Chief for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if there is a fire alarm that goes off, then please follow us to the front of the building, where we, out the main doors, where we will carry out a roll call as the RVP for our fire evacuation procedures. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, you want to do this one?
Sorry, can I just add, so this is a reminder to everyone, we are holding this meeting in a working fire station, okay? So the crew may be called out at any time. If this happens, there will be a tannoy announcement and it will be repeated. So what I suggest we do is if we hear that, we all pause, let the fire crew go off and do what they need to do, and then we'll restart the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 5, declarations of interests.
So, Chair, we have 2 declarations of interest. So the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Matt Cook, and members of the Service Leadership Board, including myself, who are all paid a percentage of the Chief Fire Officer's pay, have declared an interest in paper 18, which is the annual review of remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive. And Temporary Assistant Chief Fire Officer Paula Lyons has also declared an interest in paper 19, which is entitled Appointment of Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Thank you again, Amanda. We're moving on to agenda item 6, which is the public access, and we have received a public access statement from the Fire Brigades Union, and that will be read out by Matt Senior.
Thanks, Paul. Morning, everyone. It's good to see you all again. Yes, I'm one of the elected officials for the Fire Brigades Union in Avon, elected by members who work for this fire and rescue service, and I'm a firefighter at Bedminster. As many of you will remember, the FBU vehemently opposed the removal of 40 grey book roles during 2022. We opposed them on the grounds of safety, both for firefighters and members of the public. We implored the service to continue to explore alternative options before making drastic cuts to the numbers of frontline operational staff. This fire authority supported our position against those proposals, and those roles were saved. The welfare and safety of our crews was protected, and the quality of service to the public was maintained. Members of the FBU recognise the efforts made by the service to look at alternative savings since then. We recognise that the service is legally obligated to provide a balanced budget, and the erosion of funding over the last decade of austerity has made this increasingly difficult. We welcome the work by the efficiencies team in exploring different methods of saving money. We believed back in 2022 that there was not enough focus on efficiencies or making existing systems better. The attention seemed to be focused on savings and reductions. It's good to see that all departments in the service have pulled together and have made changes where possible. We recognise that the service has many legal obligations to support emergency operations and that there is a legal responsibility to ensure those objectives are fulfilled. Reducing the budgets for those departments is not ideal, but this is the situation Avon Fire and Rescue Service has been put in. We must remember that whilst all teams within the service play an important role, it is a fire engine carrying a properly crewed team of highly skilled firefighters that the public expects when they call 999. We are the last emergency service left that can reach you within minutes after your call. We must protect that and not allow the service's focus to drift from what its core function is, or we will end up in a race to the bottom. The efficiencies and savings paper from February 14th highlights £515,000 of savings. 212 of those are from grey book roles. It also states that, whilst maintaining appliance availability, 2 of these roles have been taken from Incident Command Training and 2 have been taken from Yate Fire Station. All grey book roles are frontline. Even if they are seconded into a department, they are still frontline firefighters. You can also see in the same paper where £116,000 worth of savings have been made by utilising the seconded grey book roles back into fire cover to reduce the overtime bill. A grey book post in any department still provides resilience to the front line whilst also carrying out work vital to fulfil our statutory duties. We must highlight to the authority that previous changes to the shift system at Yate means there is no longer hold-time fire cover at Yate Station during the hours of 7 p.m. through the night to 7 a.m. The removal of 2 posts at Yate does not affect fire appliance availability during the day. However, under the shift review, there is no guaranteed cover from Yate Fire Station at night. The service has identified a massive deficit in its budget, a deficit that will be addressed with the funding we all need, or it will result in cuts. With this horizon now upon us, we must question the appointment of an additional ACFO at a cost to the service of £128,756 annually. We note this decision wasn't made by the new CFO, but has been agreed prior to his arrival. We do not think this decision can be justified to the taxpayer given the current financial climate as highlighted in the medium-term financial plan. This position has been created without a promotion process occurring, neither for the original role of area manager, which has now been backfilled, or for the 3rd ACFO. The decision to appoint a 4th area manager in June 2024 without giving others the opportunity to apply led to a complaint from the officers section of the FBU. The response to this complaint was that it was justified for succession planning purposes, but without a process for the role, this is a direct example of one of our HMI failings. The HMI report criticised Avon's promotion process as being unfair and lacking transparency. In October 2024, on their revisit, HMI CFRS reiterated that cultural issues, including those tied to leadership and promotion, still required significant work. We say that not running a process at all is being unfair and lacks transparency. Succession planning is not a valid reason to avoid advertising vacant roles within the service. There are many fantastic members of staff within Avon who deserve the opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities. We welcome the appointment of our new CFO and we look forward to working together with him and continuing our good working relationship with the Senior Leadership Board. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, and I'll pass over to the other Matt for a response.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Fire Brigades Union, and good morning to members. I have written a statement to the Fire Brigades Union from myself as Chief Fire Officer. So I want to convey my personal thank you to the Fire Brigades Union for your detailed letter and your continued structured dialogue between us. We deeply value engagement and the shared commitment to ensuring we provide a safe, effective and resilient service to both the public and our people. Our financial environment and efficiency challenges. We acknowledge and appreciate your members' recognition of the challenges that we face in producing a balanced budget within a constrained financial environment. As you rightly point out, a decade of austerity has significantly eroded our funding, making the task of finding efficiencies even more difficult. We remain committed to doing everything possible to protect frontline service delivery and firefighter safety, whilst also meeting our legal and operational obligations. As your Chief Fire Officer, I and the Fire Authority have lobbied MPs and the Government for additional funding, a commitment that Senior Leadership Board and I will continue to make in the coming months. The role of the Efficiency and Savings Team has indeed been to challenge existing processes across all departments and identify alternative savings that protect operational capacity as far as possible. The £515,000 worth of efficiencies outlined in the February 14th paper reflect this collective effort. These decisions have been complex and every effort has been made to avoid impacting frontline services. A clarification on the specific posts and Yate fire cover. In relation to the specific posts you have referenced, of the 4 grey-book roles identified, we have been able to reduce this down to 3. 2 are from the Incident Command Training Team and 1 is from the Risk Team, not the Flexible Crewing Trial at Yate. These roles were not directly embedded in immediate fire appliance availability, and changes have been carefully managed to maintain operational resilience. Regarding Yate, I would like to offer assurance there has been no reduction in fire cover. Yate has operated as a day cruise station since approximately 2010, and this model remains unchanged. The introduction of flexible crewing does not affect the station's availability during the day. We understand your concerns around nighttime cover and confirm that there remains on-call availability from 1900 hours until 0700 hours. Senior leadership appointments and transparency. While the appointment of the additional Assistant Chief Fire Officer was agreed before my arrival of Chief Fire Officer, I can confirm that a thorough and robust selection process was undertaken, resulting in 2 appointable candidates in June 2024. I recognise the importance of transparency and fairness in all appointments. Your concerns regarding process and perception are noted, and we are committed to ensuring all leadership appointments align with fairness, principles and HMIC FRS's recommendations. We fully support open opportunities and inclusive merit-based succession planning. As also highlighted by HMIC FRS in their challenges around necessary improvements to the whole organisation, the service also has a succession planning policy for guidance. Our challenges ahead. The challenges we face together are significant. Following the HMIC FRS report in November 2023, with 4 causes of concern, 1 now discharged and 31 areas for improvement, the service remains in engaged status requiring significant improvement. We are embarking on a cultural change programme to nurture inclusion, belonging and togetherness. We have significant efficiencies and savings to deliver, requiring complex and difficult choices. We continue to progress a 7-part PFI training programme, Bath Station redevelopment, Weston-super-Mare fire station refurbishment and ongoing investment in our mobilising system upgrades. We are facing significant transformation over the next 2 years and beyond. The appointment of an Assistant Chief Fire Officer for portfolio is essential to maintain strategic oversight and continuity on our continuous improvement journey. This permanent appointment will provide structure and continuous improvement is embedded into business as usual. And the Assistant Chief Fire Officer for the Portfolio Directorate continues to play a key strategic vital role, presenting regular progress to the Avon Fire Authority and His Majesty's Inspectorates for Fire Performance and Oversight Group known as FPOG. I am committed to build a collaborative future, and I thank the FBU for your kind words following my appointment as Chief Fire Officer. The Senior Leadership Board and I are committed to strengthening our ongoing relationship with you, and we welcome your continued support as we stand together and shape Avon Fire and Rescue Service into the outstanding service I know it to be. There is much to do as we navigate the challenges ahead, but by working collaboratively, we can continue to protect and strengthen the vital service we provide to the public. Thank you again for your correspondence and your continued commitment to the safety of our communities and our firefighters. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chief. Moving on to Chair's business, item 7, and I've got quite a lot of this. Welcome everyone, first off, to this meeting. I don't know if we've held a meeting in Weston Fire Station before, but once before. But it's nice to be down by the sea, even if it's gone a bit grey. So this Fire Authority AGM is taking place in Weston Fire Station, and we are recording the meeting for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. So can I first off extend a warm welcome to the new members who've joined the authority over the past few weeks, and I had the pleasure of going through the new member induction with them. Councillors Annie Stafford-Townsend and Raj Sood. Welcome. Could we please also thank a councillor we have not already thanked, who is not returning to the Fire Authority, namely Councillor Serena Ralston, and wish her good luck for the future. I would also like to thank Station Manager Anna James and Watch Manager Chris Bacon and the crew here at Weston today for their help in accommodating this meeting.
One item from me, a clerk reminder, please can members complete their register of interest forms. We have had to revert back to a paper-based system because the online system wasn't working for everyone, unfortunately. You did receive an email on the 4th of June at 16:33 with instructions, and Emma has some blank forms with her today. I've only got 9 of 20 so far, so please, if you can do that, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Amanda. So since our last Fire Authority meeting, we've had a visit to Gambia. Trustees from GAFSIP, one of the Fire Authority's nominated charities, and other Avon Fire and Rescue staff visited Gambia in March this year. The visit was very successful and numerous training sessions took place, including by our mechanics from Nova Way. I'd like to thank the Gambian Fire and Rescue Service for hosting our visit, and also the attendees from Avon Fire who made the trips such a success. NFCC Digital Data and Technology Excellence in Digital Award. The Intranet Project Team has been nominated for this year's NFCC Digital Data and Technology Excellence in Digital Award. It's easy for me to say. The awards will take place at the conference on 1st of July, and well done to them. Congratulations also to the 4 candidates who have successfully completed the Leadership Academy. The 18-month programme forms a key part of our long-term commitment to developing a diverse, capable and confident leadership pipeline to meet the challenges of both today and the future. Bristol Pride is coming up. The service will once again be hosting a Get Ready With Us for Bristol Pride event at Temple Station, and would love as many people as possible to join on the day. This year's event will take place on Saturday the 12th of July from 8:30 to 10 o'clock, so we can join our communities and partnering agencies for the parade march through Bristol City Centre. So please, if you can, go along. So now we get on to introductions. I'm Councillor Paul Goggin and represent Hartcliffe and Witherwood Ward, and I'd like other members please to introduce themselves. I'll go to my left.
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward in the fine city and county of Bristol.
Cam Hayward, Councillor for Knoll in Bristol.
Councillor Yasin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill Ward, Bristol City Council.
Annie Townsend, Central Ward in Bristol.
Councillor Tom Menard, Hallfield Ward in Bristol.
Councillor Dan Thomas, Councillor for Congsby and Puxton on North Somerset Council.
Councillor Raj Sood, representing Frenchy and Downend in South Gloucestershire. Thank you.
Councillor Ron Hardy, representing Emerson's Green in South Gloucester.
Good morning, Councillor Matthew Riddle, representing the Severn Vale Ward in South Gloucestershire. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Robert Payne, Councillor for Weston-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council.
Good morning, Robin Moss, I represent Westfield in Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Thank you, and now I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves, and again I'll start on my left.
Good morning everyone, Amanda Brown, Clerk and Monitoring Officer.
Good morning everybody, Luke Gazzard, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery.
Good morning, Amber Foreman, Director of Corporate Services.
Good morning, Verity Lee, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, Claire Bentley, Head of Finance.
Good morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Good morning members and colleagues, Richard Welsh, Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Good morning all. Paula Lyons, leading portfolio.
Good morning, members and colleagues. Matt Cook, I'm the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive.
Thank you, everyone. I'd just like to remind people to use your microphones when you're speaking, and if you could turn them off when you finish, that would be great. It's important that microphones are turned on when speaking to ensure that all discussion is captured on the recording of the meeting. Voting today will take place by asking members for a show of hands. I'll ask for any votes against, any abstentions, and then finally any votes for. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Avon Fire Authority held on the 19th of March 2025. I'd like to propose these are a fair and accurate record of what went on. Does anybody have any queries? No? Well, I'll propose that. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Dan. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. And I'll sign those and pass those to the clerk. In fact, here's one I prepared earlier. Moving on to committee minutes. Now, I'm going to ask members to note the committee minutes in bulk, both open and confidential minutes, as they have already been approved by their committees. However, if you wish to discuss the committee confidential minutes further, please advise me and do not raise the content of the exempt minutes until we reach the confidential section at the end of the meeting. And the minutes we are considering are minutes of the ordinary meeting of AGOC, the Audit, Governance and Oversight Committee, held on the 14th of February, and the open and confidential minutes of the ordinary meeting of the PRC, the Policy and Resources Committee, held on 30th of January 2025. Does anybody have any issues with the minutes or corrections, amendments? No. Okay, I'd like to propose that they are an accurate representation. May I have a seconder? Yeah. Thank you. All votes in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on now to an emergency item by the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Members, apologies. I don't like adding emergency items to your agenda, but something has recently come up. So I'm presenting to you one item of Clerk's urgent action under Standing Order 45, which permits me to do this, and it's to protect the interests of the Fire Authority. So you will recall that at your extraordinary Fire Authority meeting on the 2nd of June, you kindly approved the recruitment process for a new clerk and monitoring officer, and you approved the arrangements we had in hand for emergency monitoring officer cover during any gap between me leaving and the new person arriving, with Shazia Daya from One Legal covering that gap. I have now been in further dialogue with One Legal, and I'm advised that they would be willing to act as deputy MO for meetings, but they request that the Fire Authority designate a serving Avon Fire and Rescue Service officer as monitoring officer to cover the gap. This is in accordance with the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, Section 5, which allows you to appoint an officer. We are suggesting that you appoint the Director of Corporate Services, Amber Foreman, to my left, as interim monitoring officer, and the Director of Corporate Services would be supported, I can guarantee, by legal professionals, namely our in-house General Counsel, Nina Lingard, and Shazia Daya from One Legal for Fire Authority meetings. So I therefore invite a proposer and a seconder, please, to appoint the Director of Corporate Services as your interim monitoring officer until the Fire Authority have appointed my replacement, a new clerk and MO, and also to appoint Shazia Daya from One Legal as Deputy MO. So,
I'll propose that.
Thank you. And Robin?
Happy to second. Thank you for the detail, Amanda. There's nothing like a lovely bit of red tape for Monday morning.
Yes, apologies for the red tape. Any questions before we go to the vote? Yes, Robin.
Can I just ask how long that arrangement would be in place for?
So we're out for advert at the moment. The closing date is the 7th of July, which is next Monday, I believe. And then we're going to be doing a process of shortlisting and interviews. Interviews the last week of July. My official last day in post is the 15th of August. And if we appoint someone the last week of July during interviews, it may be that person's got to give a notice period. So we imagine the cover will be up to 3 months. That's our best guess at this stage. Obviously, it's dependent on us having sufficiently good number of candidates applying for the role. So we'll review those arrangements in due course.
Just very quickly, pick up that point. Risk assessment is that there is a possibility that that's move not to appoint. I presume that would come back to us as a committee, and a part of that would be the cover as well.
Absolutely. The Chief Officer and I have already discussed possible B plans, so the matter will be brought back to you. Thank you. Are we ready to go for the vote? Yes. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Thank you so much, and I apologise again for bringing this to you today, but thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, and looks like I've got a bit of an easy ride for the next couple of items because I'm passing back to you. Member appointments for the municipal year.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so my paper's at page 33 of your pack. It's the paper you receive at every AGM. I might just allow that noise to stop. Okay, super. So we present this paper every year, and I'm asking you members, if you look at the recommendations on page 33, to allocate members to the Fire Authority committees. The committees will appoint their committee vice chairs at their first committee meetings, and to appoint your employer representatives for the local pension board. So that relates to the table on page 35 of your paper. I'm also asking you to appoint your representative on the Local Government Association. At paragraph 5.7, I explain that by convention that's normally your chair. And finally, I'm asking you to appoint a representative for South West Council's meetings and employers panel. And apologies, David, I forgot to mention this earlier, but at paragraph 5.8, Councillor Wilcox has offered to do this previously. I don't know if he's still willing to do so. Thank you. So if I take you to paragraph 5.1, you will see that the current membership of the Fire Authority is 20 elected members, and they are set out at Appendix 1 at page 39. You have already been informed that we have 2 brand new members appointed to the Fire Authority from South Gloucestershire Council and Bristol City Council, so a big warm welcome to you both. Councillor Raj Sood and also Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend. It was a pleasure to spend the day with you on Friday for your induction. Thank you. So that's your membership, and the membership has been divided up between the committees as shown in the table on page 35. At paragraph 5.2, I just need to bring one matter to your attention. One of your members, Councillor Chris Murphy, has been mobilised as a member of the UK Reserve Forces for the Royal Navy. His mobilisation started back on the 30th of May, and he expects that mobilisation to conclude on the 30th of November. He is based within the UK, but he won't be able to attend Fire Authority and committee meetings as they're held during the day. I took the liberty to approve his absence on your behalf, bearing in mind that this is due to call out by the Armed Forces, but also Avon Fire and Rescue Services signed the Armed Forces Covenant on the 22nd of July 2024, which pledged to support UK reservists. So I hope all members are comfortable with that decision. In terms of allocation to committee places, every member is expected to sit on at least one committee. You will notice they're slightly imbalanced this year because of recent changes. So we've got more Liberal Democrat members on AJOC and more Labour members on the Policy and Resources Committee. I did email everybody, all the political group leaders, and say, do you want to move everybody around, or are you happy with that? And I'm reliably informed that we try to keep politics out of decisions here, and everybody's very comfortable to leave it as it is. So the table is set out on page 35 with the 2 new members slotted in to where their previous members were sitting in red. Under the Constitution, your chair of the Fire Authority automatically becomes the chair of the Policy Resources Committee, and your vice chair of the Fire Authority automatically becomes the chair of the Audit Committee. I don't think I need to go into any more detail. Just to check, so David, are you happy to continue?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, would you be happy to still be the Local Government Association rep? And for the Local Pension Board, I've got two members here, Councillors Ron Hardy and Robert Payne. Are you both happy to continue on the Local Pension Board? Thank you.
Thank you both.
So does anyone have any objections to the appointment set out in the table before we go to a vote on approving that? No? Ron?
This isn't an objection, but I'm wondering, as Councillor Chris Murphy is not going to be available for 6 months, should we be appointing someone else to deputise his position on the Policy and Resources Committee? I suspect we should, because there's obviously going to be one space.
I did consider that. I think the reason I felt it was probably not worth it in the short term was some of the period has already gone on his deployment, so he's coming back in November. There is a stand down in the month of August as well, which is another month that's not affected. And actually you have more members on Policy and Resources anyway. You'll notice that there's only 9 on AJOP because of your independent member, whereas there's 11 on Policy and Resources Committee. So if you're comfortable, Councillor, I would suggest that we run with the gap, but if Emma should get desperate on quorum for a particular PRC meeting, that we ring around and see if anyone can help us out.
Okay, that's fine. I have no particular issue with that. We've got 2 new councillors there that can give us a lot of advice and comment, I'm sure.
Any other questions? Can I ask that we take the recommendations in bulk so that you allocate members to the Fire Authority committees in accordance with the table at page 35. You appoint your employer representatives, Councillors Ron Hardy and Robert Payne, to the Local Pension Board. You appoint the chair to your representative on the Local Government Association, and you appoint Councillor Wilcox as your representative at South West Council's meetings. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Amanda. And I'll give you a second, just shuffle the papers, because you're coming back for agenda item 11, member information 2425.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, this is another standard paper you receive at every AGM. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically at Appendix 1 is a list of all the allowances which have been paid to members. There are some names there which you will recognise from previously, because this is a backward-looking document, so some members have already left us, but it sets out the allowances paid. Just to also mark that we have now introduced a new payroll system and a new system for claiming your expenses. So please look out for the link to setting that up, which I think is going to be sent out soon. There is a 3-month limit for claiming expenses, but I think we can give you a bit more wiggle room as we're going through a transition to a new system. So just be aware of that. I do really recommend and urge people to claim their expenses. Some members never have, and I don't understand that, so please do claim your expenses. So the recommendation is that you're asked to note this report and authorise publication of the figures at Appendix 1. Any questions?
At the bottom of page 41, there's a link which doesn't seem to work. The members' attendance summary.
Okay. It might be, I don't know if it's connected to the we're just trying it now. It worked when we published the pack because I checked it, so I don't know what's happened there. I can send you a new link, Councillor, in the by email if that helps.
Clerk, if I may give some insight, it's an intranet link, not an extranet link, so you won't be able to access it from outside Avon Fire.
Okay, error noted for next time. You can search for yourself. So on our modern.gov site, there is a page for member statistics, and so you can access that information. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
I was going to add, it's working in this building. If the member would like to, if he's on the internet here, it will work here. It worked for me anyway.
Thank you. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Amanda. And finally, your Fire Authority meeting dates, I'm going to pass back to you again. Agenda item 12.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, page 45, we're just representing to you the meeting dates for this municipal year, 2025-26. They have now been checked to avoid clashes with the unitary authorities, and we are moving the meetings around the unitary authority areas. So you will start to notice that you're going to places other than HQ and Severn Park every time. So you will be, so my urge is to check the address on the invite because it will be moving around a bit. At paragraph 5.1, there's just been one change. We've moved a member briefing, so it was supposed to be earlier. It's now going to be on Thursday, the 31st of July. So you'll see in the table, on the 31st of July, there's a Policy and Resources Committee meeting in the morning. We're inviting you for lunch, what's not to like, at Severn Park. And then from lunchtime onwards, we're doing a briefing to you that day, which will focus a lot on efficiencies and savings. So a really important briefing. It's also my last day, so I'll be gutted if you're not there to say goodbye. So no pressure, but we'd love to see you there. And we have taken on board feedback about getting meetings in places with more public transport and so on. So any questions on that paper? No. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda, and you can have a bit of a rest now. And we'll move on to Verity for agenda item 13, which is the 2024-25 revenue budget final outturn position. Verity.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, I'm loud. So there are quite a few finance papers in this agenda today, so I will work on the assumption that the papers have been read and just try and pick out the important points. So this first paper, as the Chair has said, is a backward-looking paper. It's looking at the outturn for the 24-25 financial year, so the year ending March 2025, against the revenue budget. So the first page of this paper really just confirms when the budget was set. So we presented the 24-25 budget to the Fire Authority on the 20th of March 2024 for approval. We're now looking at how we have performed against that approved budget. We can see the detail of this in Appendix 1, which is on page 53 of your packs. But what I will do is move on to section 5 of the paper, which starts on page 50, and just talk through some of the key variances that we've seen for the year. So firstly, with regards to income, we've seen an under-recovery on income overall. So we've had around £350,000 less income than we originally anticipated when the budget was set. There's been two key moving parts really in that. We've had an under-recovery on central government grant income, mainly in relation to business rates, reconciliation income, but that's been partially offset by some additional other income we've received in terms of investment income. And we have a line called other income, which contains many different things, lots of them small. So the offsetting position there is a net under recovery in income. But what we see as we move through expenditure is that we've seen some underspends which help to offset that position. So moving on to employee costs, we've seen quite a significant underspend in whole-time firefighter costs of just over £700,000. This has been reported throughout the year, so those members that are members of the Policy and Resources Committee, we have been reporting this underspend throughout the year and that expectation that we would underspend on this cost line, and it's to do with the way that the budget was set. When we move on to a paper later on in the agenda, I'll talk about how we've re-looked at that budget setting assumption to make sure that we don't see such significant movements in this cost line going forwards. Other employee costs, we've seen some variances on control staff, but we have now earlier in the year, we ran a recruitment process, and that area is fully staffed now. So the additional overtime costs that were generated earlier in the year have stopped. Moving on to page 51, premises and transport costs. So the combination of the two, we've seen around £60,000 overspend, but we've actually seen quite a large overspend in rents and rates, mainly around how the budget was set. And again, we've looked at that for the 25-26 budget setting process, and that's been mitigated by some underspends we've seen in the fleet budget, which is mainly in the vehicle maintenance lines. If we move on to supplies and services, we've seen quite a significant underspend here, around 1.3 million. A large proportion of that, just over £500,000, is because of a credit note that we received in relation to airwave costs. That's a cost that's going to reduce going forwards, and again, the 25-26 budget setting process has taken that into account, but this was an unknown. We didn't realise that we were getting this credit, so that was received late on in the year. We've also seen some significant underspends in things like equipment, subscriptions and uniforms. We're not expecting all of those underspends to be permanently reduced costs. So what we've done is where we've had underspends and we've been able to top up reserves, we're putting reserves in place to make sure that we can fund increased costs in future years. And again, we've got a reserves paper later on this agenda where we'll look at how we've utilised that underspend to put reserves in place. But what we have seen overall is the ability to top up our reserves. So if we move to the appendix on page 53, and right at the bottom in the other cost section, there's a line called transfer to or from reserves. We expected to be topping up our revenue budget, so taking around £670,000 from our reserves to offset some of the costs that we'd be incurring during this financial year. What's happened is because of the other moving parts, and we've seen underspends, a net underspend position, we've been able to actually top up our reserves to the tune of around £600,000. So it gives you around a £1.2 million variance there. But what we've done is topped up those reserves, and we'll see in the reserves paper later on the agenda where we have put that additional money so that it can help us in future years. So it's a good news story from 24-25 perspective in that we've had an underspend and we've been able to put that money aside to help us with some of the pressures we're seeing in future years. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Verity. That's very clear, and it's great that we've been able to top up the reserves. I'll open up for questions now from members. David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Verity, for your report. Looking at Appendix 1, in the other costs table 5, there's a line item for HMIC FRS costs. Can I ask what they actually are? Because I'm interested to know why it's actually costing us money to be reported on, please.
When we set the budget, we put aside an amount of money, and it was kind of a rough estimate of money that we thought we might have to spend to help us deliver some of the actions in the HMIC FRS action plan. And actually, a lot of those have really come from the staff cost line. So what's happened is we haven't recorded them specifically against the lines that come, but a lot of it has been staff costs. There's been some IT-related investment as well in the service. I don't know if Claire can add any more specifics on those.
Yeah, so we did have some additional resources around the culture piece related to HMIC, which is in there. And as Verity said, there's also some additional IT costs which went through, which obviously supported the recommendations that we're working towards. So those are the major pieces within that.
So it's costs to actually support the reporting process as opposed to paying directly for those services. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Robin.
Is it more accurate to say that it's costs to respond to the process to improve?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's costs we've had to incur to help us deliver against the action plan.
Thank you, Robin. Would we be able to change the heading on that to response to HMIC FRS or something?
Yeah, we can change it. I'm not sure if it comes up again in future, because it's not something we specifically put in the budget for 25-26. This was a one-off, but we could change it for the publication of this final outcome. But for future years, we haven't specifically allocated that line.
Thank you, Verity. Do we have any other questions? David.
Reading ahead on the report on page 73, Appendix 1 there, for the revised balance sheet, you do actually detail some of the actual areas, but there's no values associated with them.
Yeah, they're hangovers from the previous budget setting process, so they were in there from prior year. Probably we could have removed them and not had them in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other questions? No, thank you. Well, we are asked as an authority to review the final 2024-25 capital outturn as shown in Appendix 1. Sorry? I've skipped on to the next one, sorry. We are asked and the recommendation is that we review the final outturn spending position against the 2024-25 revenue budget shown in Appendix 1. I will propose that we do so, or have done so. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, David. And any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour? Thank you. So now moving on to the item that I'd already started, the 2024-25 capital programme final outturn position. And again, I'm going to ask Verity to present on this.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start presenting the paper in full, I noticed that there's a slight error that I wanted to correct for the minutes. So if we turn to Appendix 1 on page 59, in the actual expenditure column, there should be a number against the control actual spend. At the moment, it's blank. I think it must have been deleted in error when I was finalising these papers. So that should say 485,000 as an actual spend, which takes the total to 1903. And we should see in that variance column, instead of 730,000 as a variance, it should be 245,000. And then the total variance should read 3584. So I just wanted to note that for the minutes. But what I can do is amend that and have a final updated version for publication. But just to note that for the minutes before I started. So similar to the revenue paper, this is a backward-looking paper. We're looking again at actual performance against the approved capital programme for the prior financial year. There are 3 recommendations within this paper. It's to review the actual outturn. The second recommendation is to approve something. So what we're asking you today to do is to approve an updated capital programme for the next 3 years, and I'll talk about what's changed in that as I go through the paper. And the final recommendation is just to review the balance sheet extract as at the 31st of March. The background section of this paper talks about the history really in terms of the sign-off of the capital programme. So the capital programme was signed off in March 2024 last year as part of the budget setting process. We then updated that capital programme following the outturn for 23-24, which led to a really tiny adjustment of £3,000 to the overall capital programme, which was finally approved by the Fire Authority in October. So for this financial year, so 24-25, we had £5.487 million within the capital programme, and the detail of the spend against that is shown in Appendix 1. So on page 59. So the total spend for the year has been just under 2 million, 1.9 million, and as I've said, we had a variance of just over 3.5 million for the year, so we underspent against the capital programme. As we move through this paper, we'll talk about that underspend, because it's not an underspend, it's more about rephasing costs and putting them into future years. If I move on to section 5 of the paper, I won't go through these in detail, but this section 5 talks about what has actually been spent, where the main areas of spend have been in the capital programme throughout the year, which most significantly have been on the premises area in relation to the final stages of the Bedminster project, and then the initial costs we're seeing for the redevelopment of the Bath Fire Station. Moving on to page 57 and the capital programme in future years. So paragraph 5.6 just confirms that there's been no requirement to initiate any borrowing during the past financial year. When we first approved the capital programme, we did expect to maybe need a small amount of borrowing. When we took into account the 23-24 outturn, we didn't think we would need to borrow. And because we've kind of rephased quite a bit of spend into future years again, we haven't taken on any borrowing to fund that programme during 24-25. Paragraph 5.7 explains the adjustment that we've made to the capital programme for the future 3 years, and where I'm asking for reapproval of that programme. So what's happened is when we set the budget and the capital programme for the next 3 years at a point in time, which was in early 2025, we look at where we think the current year, 24-25 capital programme will end up. And we did expect there to be a rephasing of costs into future years, so we did take some of that into account. But what actually happened was that the underspend was slightly more than we anticipated, so we need to rephase a little bit more spend into future. So there's an additional £772,000 that needs to be moved into the future year's capital programme. So it's just rephasing of costs, and we can see that if we turn to Appendix 2 on page 61. The first column in this appendix is called, we've named adjustment to actuals, and the total on that column is 772,000. So what we've done is, this is where we've seen a variance to the assumption that was made when this programme was first approved. And what we've done is added that into the 25-26 programme. So you can see for 25-26, we're now expecting total capital expenditure to be 15.4 million. The previously approved programme was for 14.6 million. So that's where that £772,000 has been rephased. So the overall capital programme for the 3 years is now just over 38 million compared to the 37 million that was approved earlier this year. It's not an increase in total capital spend, it's just rephasing it into the next 3 years rather because it wasn't spent during 24-25. The final little bits to mention are the balance sheet reporting. So right at the bottom of page 57, there's a few paragraphs there around why we're presenting the balance sheet to you. To be in line with SIP for best practice. And the balance sheet, or an extract of the balance sheet, is presented in Appendix 3 on page 63. This isn't the full balance sheet. It gives you some of the kind of larger or more risky areas of the balance sheet, so areas where we see significant movements. And the reason that we're presenting this to you is to be in line with SIP for best practice, but also because going forwards we're likely to see more movement on things like our long-term borrowing as we fund that capital programme in future. So it's really to start giving this element of our finances a little bit more scrutiny. So just to pick out some of the key movements, we can see cash has gone up quite significantly when compared to the end of the prior year. And there's two main reasons for that, really. One is we received some of 25-26's funding in advance. So that came into our bank account earlier than we expected. And also we received, as part of our pension top-up grants during 24-25, we received some additional money in relation to the Matthews and McLeod remedies, and not all of that money has been spent, so some of that is still sitting within our cash balances. The reserves at the bottom there, we'll go into reserves in more detail in a paper later on the agenda, but the movements there link to where we've been using our reserves to fund the capital programme and also where we've topped up the reserves as a result of the underspend on the revenue budget. So just to link that to the paper we have just seen. And the very final bit I just wanted to mention is on page 58 in paragraph 5.12 about prudential and treasury management indicators. So usually as part of this paper, those members of the Policy and Resources Committee will know that we normally have a look at the prudential and treasury management indicators and where we are performing against those indicators. I haven't presented it for you here as part of this paper because it comes up in a paper later on the agenda just to avoid duplication, but we will look at full year outturn for those indicators later on in the agenda today. And that's all I really wanted to say on that one, so happy to open up for questions.
Thank you, Verity, and thank you for explaining it in language that us mere mortals can understand. I'd like to open up for questions. Robin.
Thank you for the Verity, and thank you for the explanation on a Monday morning, which must have been take some preparation, as Paul said, complex. You reference in the report the effect, and it's the effect of capital on revenue, and there's the clear effect of less borrowing, less interest payments, less effect in the revenue account. Are there any other issues within the revenue account which are affected by capital underspend? I'm thinking, I mean, the two sides are obviously there's any spend to save, and if it's not spent you can't save. The other is on equipment that actually has maintenance costs which isn't bought. And I wondered if there was any reflection within that report of the consequences of underspend.
I think you're right, there is another element of there to do with maintenance. So if we're not investing in things sooner, is there a higher maintenance cost associated? I would say we don't assume any savings in the revenue budget in terms of any, so rebuilding a station, for example, for Bath, we haven't built any assumptions into the budget yet around what savings that might generate for utility savings and things like that, running costs. So we're hoping that there will be additional benefits when they come through. So in terms of a variance against things that have been delayed, we haven't assumed any benefits yet. So we shouldn't see any detrimental impact because of that. In theory, when those projects are delivered, we should see slight benefits that we haven't kind of baked in at this point.
David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Verity. On Appendix 3, I'd like to understand more about the debtors line in reference to pensions, particularly the respect of Matthews and McLeod. That's not a reference that I've come across before, please.
Pensions are a complex area. We get a top-up grant each year which holds our firefighter pension income and expenditure neutral. So it means in our revenue account we have income and expenditure that are equal to each other, and it's the Home Office top up so that our costs are equal to our income. What they did during 24-25 was give us some extra for Matthews and McLeod remedy. So some additional costs that and it was an estimate of costs that they expect services, so all services received an estimate relative to their service, they are expected to incur additional costs to facilitate those remedies, like payments that are due to be made. We haven't made many payments in relation to that, which is why I also reference our cash being higher, because we've received that money but not yet really paid much of it out. So what happens as well is with this top-up grant, you receive it 9 months in advance, 3 months in arrears. And because we've had, so the debtor represents the bit that you're receiving in arrears, and because we've had this extra bit received in 24-25, it does mean there's less coming in 25-26, which is why the debtor is reduced. It's quite a complicated process. So the amount that we are expecting to receive during 25-26 will represent 3 months' worth of last year and 9 months of this year, if that makes sense.
Sort of, as only pensions can, but what's the reference to Matthews and McLeod?
Out with that bit. So Matthews and McLeod is the names of the parties in the court decision, which we've all referred to as immediate detriment. So you have had lots of papers on immediate detriment. It's exactly the same point. So basically, individuals with those surnames challenged the government's changes to pensions in 2015 because they said, you've caused me immediate detriment because I was planning to retire and you've nicked a lot of my pension. So the government was told to change pension regulations for people affected within a certain date range so that they didn't have that immediate detriment. So that's where the Matthews and remedy.
Thank you, that clarifies a lot, yes.
Thank you. Matthew.
Thank you very much, Jen. Thank you very much, Verity, for your excellent report. I see on Appendix 3, on the notes, Note A, that you show depreciation there. And I was just wondering why it's not shown in the budget. Really coming back to the earlier question about the relationship between the budget and the balance sheet. Thank you.
It's a local government nuance. You don't charge depreciation to taxpayer funds. So we reverse depreciation out and we charge something called MRP, which is to do with your capital financing requirement and recognising the kind of pressure, and your capital. It's a difficult one to explain, but you basically replace depreciation with a local government equivalent to reflect your capital investments and your capital investment needs in the future. So we don't record depreciation in our revenue budget for that reason, because it's not something that's chargeable to the taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, Matthew, if you could just turn your microphone off, that's great. We have any other questions for Verity? No? Okay. So we are asked to review the final 2024-25 capital outturn, shown in Appendix 1, approve the revised 2025-2026 to 2027-2028 capital programme based on the final 2024-2025 capital spend position shown in Appendix 2. And finally, to review the balance sheet extract as at 31st of March 2025, as shown in Appendix 3. And I would suggest we take all three of those together. And I will propose that we do approve and review. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Dan, thank you very much. Any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to agenda item 15, which is the revised 25-26 budget and medium-term financial plan. And again, back to Verity to present this one, please.
Thank you. So this one is actually an addition to the agenda that normally comes up in the AGM, and it's because of our legal requirement to set a balanced budget. And the summary at the top of this paper just goes through the history of what's happened. So we presented a budget on the 14th of February to the Fire Authority. At that meeting, the Fire Authority approved the £5 increase in precept. But we noted at that meeting that we'd received a grants letter the day before, which impacted that revenue budget. And so we brought back an updated version of the revenue budget and medium-term financial plan on the 19th of March. That updated budget was approved, but it was noted within that budget that there was an unidentified savings gap of around 1.3 million. So what we're doing today is bringing you back a paper which gives you the adjustments we're making to the 25-26 budgets in order to demonstrate that we have got a balanced budget for 25-26. So if I move on to page 66, and the table at the bottom of page 66, this is the table that really walks you through where we are now expecting to be in terms of the budget for this current financial year. So the first line there is the approved deficit we had at the beginning of the year. So we did have 1.8 million of deficit in total. What we've done is had a look at all assumptions within this revenue budget, and there are a few that actually have had a detrimental impact in terms of increasing that deficit since we set the budget a few months ago. Two of those are in relation to pay awards. So actually that first one, the Grey Book Pay Award, it should really say approved now. That Grey Book Pay Award has been approved at 3.2%. We made a budget assumption of 2%, so obviously there's an additional cost pressure there. Similarly for the Green Book Pay Award, it's not yet been approved, but it's been, I think the level has been communicated at 3.2%, so similar level, not yet confirmed, but expected impact of just over £100,000 for this current financial year in comparison to the 2% that we originally assumed. The third kind of additional pressure that we've accounted for 25-26 is in relation to the mobilising system upgrade. So members might recall when we set the budget, we were in the process of procuring and going through the tender process. So we didn't know who was going to be appointed as the new provider for this system. We did know that this system was likely to be a cloud-based system, so not have a capital impact and likely to put more pressure on the revenue budget. So we allowed for £1 million of revenue per year across the medium-term financial plan. Now we've got the appointment. The first year is expected to cost us just over £1.2 million, so an additional £200,000 pressure, which we've taken into account there. So if we take all of those three on top of the deficit that we originally had, we're just over 2.5 million that we need to save in order to balance the budget. And then the second part of the table shows how we're going to do this. So we've got the identified efficiencies and savings actions of just over £500,000. They were previously presented. There's 7 actions within there that have been communicated with the Fire Authority previously. So they were already part of our plan. The additional 4 are below are new ones. So the first one there is non-pay savings. So our budget holders have completed quite a detailed exercise of reviewing the non-pay budget to see where we can reduce costs for 25-26, and we've managed to generate around £600,000 worth of savings to help us balance the budget this year. We've got some additional WECA funding. So WECA have been given, I think, over £500,000, and we have been allocated just over £100,000 of that to help with some additional remedial work to do with cladded buildings. Employee cost review, that is in relation to something I referenced earlier in the revenue paper where we'd seen underspends on whole-time firefighter costs, and we've gone back through the budget setting process and we identified that there was some double counting on some roles. So we've stripped that back out to make sure that we are forecasting what we think is a realistic level of spend on whole-time firefighter costs. So that brings down our cost by around 700,000. And the last thing that we are doing to help balance the budget this year is releasing a reserve to help cover some of the one-off implementation costs in relation to the mobilising project. So again, linked to the first paper I presented, we have been able to top up our reserves this year because of a underspend for the year ending March 2025, and we are going to use some of those reserves to help us offset the high implementation costs associated with the mobilising project this year to help us balance the budget. So that's the kind of route path to get us to a neutral position. If we turn to Appendix 1, which is on page 73. This kind of walks you, so the very first column is the budget that was approved in the March meeting earlier this year, and then there's a separate column for each of the items that I've just talked through to show you which lines within the accounts they affect. And that final column is the balanced budget for 25-26, and we can see there that further savings required line in the other cost section is down to nil now, so we're presenting a balanced budget. So that column is the column that we are asking for approval for today. Moving back just to the main body of the report, I will move on to page 69, and the top of page 69 talks about the section 25 statement. So I'm required to make a statement on both the robustness of the budget setting process and the adequacy and the level of reserves. That statement was produced in full in previous papers, but this is just really to reference that those statements still stand, and I am still happy that we're not placing unnecessarily high reliance on reserves, and that we have made robust assumptions as part of our budget setting process. The next section of this paper is around the medium-term financial plan. So what we're not doing here today is presenting a full updated medium-term financial plan. We are just presenting the 25-26 budget. But paragraph 5.13 just talks about or reminds members really what the deficit position we have over the next 3 years, the coming 3 years of the 4-year plan. So by the 4th year, we're looking at a deficit of around 5.5 million. Paragraph 5.14 talks about an anticipated multi-year settlement. Since I've written this paper, there has been a spending review announcement, and I think it does cover a 3-year period, but there's not been much specific mention of fire. But it did give an indication of what core spending power is expected to do for local government over the next 3 years. So what we will do is start looking at that information and what we can infer from that to help us update our future 3 years of the medium-term financial plan. And if I move over to page 70 and paragraph 5.15, I talk about here what the impact of a £5 precept referendum limit might be over the 3 outer years of the medium-term financial plan. When we set the MTFP, we set quite a prudent level of council tax increase. We did 2.99%, but we did see £5 in 25-26. So if we got £5 each year thereafter, it would have quite a significant impact on our deficit position and bring that deficit up to around 3 million rather than 5.5 million. We don't know that we're definitely going to get that, but the recent announcement suggests that most of the increases in core spending power are going to come from council tax, which kind of is what we saw in 25-26. So it's likely that that might be something we'll be able to model and work with when we look at updating the medium-term financial plan. Paragraph 5.16 really just talks about other things that we need to consider when updating the medium-term financial plan. So it's not just income, but we'll be looking at the impact of additional pay awards. So we've seen there's been 3.2% for 25-26. That will have a knock-on impact on each year thereafter. And we also need to think about whether we need to increase the pay award assumption for outer years as well, because we assume 2% each year. And actually, given where they've fallen this year, it is consideration to whether that's too low, and we need to bring that up again as well. So we will be looking again at how the mobilising system costs should pan out over the medium-term financial plan. We are expecting them to be about £750,000 as an ongoing cost once the implementation's happened, which will be a saving in the outer years of the MTFP again, so could have a positive impact on where our deficit position falls. The last bullet point there is about minimum revenue provision, and a member of the Fire Authority quite rightly mentioned that maybe we should review the assumption we make around the life of buildings, and we have re-looked at that with head of premises, and we can extend the life on the Bath programme, so we will be able to reduce some of that financing cost that we see associated with Bath, and again that will help with the medium-term financial plan and the deficit we've seen. At the bottom of page 70, I talk about how sustainable our balancing the actions we're taking to balance the 25-26 budget are, and it's really just to highlight that they're not all sustainable, and we're not going to be able to cut our non-pay budgets by £600,000 permanently, for example. The WECA funding has only been confirmed for this current financial year, so we can't assume we're going to get that additional £100,000 every year thereafter. And the mobilising reserve release is just a reserve. It can only be used once, so once that's gone, that's gone. So it's really just to reiterate that we're doing some things this year to balance the budget, but there's still a lot of work to do to sustainably balance the budget in future years. So we will be looking at bringing back an updated medium-term financial plan to the authority, taking into account what that recent spending review has, what information that's given us, as well as any updated assumptions on costs that I've just mentioned, and that will help us to kind of direct and refine our efficiencies and savings approach. So all of that information will come back to you in more detail in October. And I think that's all I wanted to say on that one.
Thank you very much, Verity, and again for the clear translation of financial terms. I remember when we approved the control contract that, as you say, the savings overall, the costs of it go up and down each year, so that there will be coming years when we see that possibly go down. It's good to hear about the multi-year, potentially, settlement. Hopefully we can get some more details on that. And during my whole time on the authority, we have always supported the higher amount of precept, because it is such a, I won't say insignificant, it's not insignificant because it comes out of people's pockets, but the small amount for the value that we get for it. And thank you to yourself and the finance team for continuously managing, against the background of, somebody said 10 years of austerity before. I think actually it was 14 years of austerity. So you and your team have done a marvellous job. And I'll open up for questions now.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Verity. I guess we can make some assumptions on the £5, being the £5 moving forward. But I guess, and I'm looking at Tom, we're heading up to Liverpool to LGA straight after this meeting. That's maybe the place, there'll be some announcements on that. Just some question on the detail of the £108,000 from WECA, which £108,000 is a lot of money, but not necessarily a lot of money in the overall scheme of things. Two things. First of all, I'm assuming that you'll have an accounting exercise on where this money is spent and how does that include North Somerset. And also, is money being channeled through WECA something we're going to assume into the future? And if the answer to that is yes, does the status of North Somerset actually have an impact on that as being a kind of non-member-ish member of WECA?
I don't know if I can answer all of it, but I can definitely answer in terms of future assumptions. We haven't assumed any further WECA funding into the future at this point, just because that hasn't been announced. We've only been told about this single-year funding settlement. In terms of the kind of cost exercises, I'm led to believe that that the work that we need to do is stuff we are kind of planning to do already. I'm going to hand over to Luke, so he knows a little bit more about the detail, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Verity. So this funding is for a project team from WECA. I think they received around about £500,000. And that is to look at remediation of 11 metre plus buildings. Now in this area, we've got around 4,000. So it's going to be a significant project working with our unitary authorities and obviously ourselves in the interim. They've given us 108,000 for 2 members of staff's time to help shape that project. And in future years, this project's going to run into at least 2030 because of the volume of properties we need to look at. There'll be future funding, but that project team are currently working to see what that looks like.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Luke. David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Verity, for another report that we can all understand. This is my yearly question about the emergency services network and where that project is and how we might pay for it in terms of implementation, please.
Yeah, so I think I could come in there again. The Emergency Service Network project is just restarting. We had some good news last week that there's a possibility of more funding. But I think we need to carry out work packages and hit milestones before we get that funding. So again, I think the deadline for that project is 2030. They've appointed an Assistant Chief Fire Officer at national level who's going to shape that project, and then we'll hit those milestones. So it's firmly on the radar and back on track.
That's good to hear. Is Airwave still fit for purpose?
Yes, I believe so at this moment in time, yes.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, David. Tom?
I just want to go back to the cladding remediation. Do we know when we'll know more about whether it's going to be funding that is going to continue?
No, I don't think we do at this moment in time. I think the project team within WECA are shaping that, and then they'll feed back into government along with the regions around the UK, and then funding will be determined from that point onwards.
Okay, thank you.
Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that the property repairs budget has gone down by just over 10%, which seems to bring it in line with what we spent on it this year, last year rather. So does that kind of beg the question, why was it set so high in the first place?
So we actually have property repair and maintenance budgets within both revenue and capital. So sometimes the projects, we have a slightly higher spend on capital, sometimes we have a slightly higher spend on revenue. So yes, we've brought it back in line with the previous revenue because of the capital investment that we're making. So if you look at the capital programme, that's actually a general line which covers quite a lot of the maintenance going forward. Also, with all the other work that we're doing, we would expect to start to see it come back down because we're not doing the additional maintenance around some of our very expensive buildings like Bath. So it's a mixture of things, but it is also because we have it both within capital and revenue, and sometimes we spend in capital, sometimes we spend in revenue. We've had a slightly lower revenue spend in 24-25, and we expect that to continue because of the capital investment that we're making.
Okay, Robert. Any other questions? Dan.
Just a quick question, since we're in Weston Fire Station. Thank you very much, Weston, for hosting us. The replacement hovercraft and the vehicle to move it to the seafront, although I would love to see it going down Milton Road. That'd be really interesting to see. Where are we with that project? If I think Richard probably would be the best one to answer.
Yeah, actually the meeting ended last week. Our replacement hovercraft is ready for collection. We've got a team going up early next week to go and collect it. The vehicle to carry it on won't be ready for some time, but so we're going to maintain the current vehicle that we have. We've got a training need for the conversion for crews, so we expect it to be fully operational by certainly September, hopefully the end of August.
Great. Just a quick follow-up. Was the decision made to buy a second-hand vehicle in the end, or a new vehicle for moving the hovercraft?
We've got a new vehicle, but we did get it at a very, very good rate.
Great. I would expect nothing else. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Dan. Any other questions? No? Okay. So, agenda item 15, we are asked to approve the final balanced 2025-26 revenue budget presented in Appendix 1, and I'll move that we do so. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Are there any votes against? Any abstentions? And all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So, moving on to agenda item 16, which is our reserves strategy. And again, Verity's presenting on this one.
Thank you. I've got another correction for the minutes, I'm afraid, before I start, so I don't forget. So, on Appendix 2, on page 89, there's a couple of reserves on there that the future numbers have just been not carried forward quite correctly. So there's the Document Management and Retention System Reserve. There's a balance of £60,000 at the end of March 25. That should read £60,000 for every future year as well. And the Priority Programmes Reserve has a balance of £272,000 for the year ended March 2026, and that should read £272,000 for each of the 3 future years as well. And that has an impact on the subtotals at the bottom as well. So the first black line there, the cash backed earmarked revenue reserves line, the totals there, so the 1987 will be increased to 2 million, and the 1313 will be increased to 1561. So just to note for the minutes, and I'll get Emma an updated version, so we make sure when we publish the reserves strategy and summary, we'll publish the updated version. So this paper, this is part of the standard AGM agenda. We are required to review our reserve strategy annually and required to publish that on the website as part of the Fire and Rescue National Framework. So we're bringing this reserve strategy for you here today to review and approve that publication. The financial implications section starting on page 76, I won't go through these in detail because what I would rather do is just refer you to Appendix 2 on page 89 and kind of talk you through what that appendix is showing you, and then it should really cover most of what's in the body of the report. So this reserve summary here, I apologise, it is quite small, shows you the audited balance at the end of March 24, so that is our opening reserve position at the beginning of the 24-25 financial year. We've then got 3 columns that show movements that have happened during 24-25. So we have transfers between reserves. These have a net nil impact, so it's where we're just reallocating items between different reserves. Utilisation of reserves, so this is where we've specifically used money that we've previously put aside for a specific purpose. And then additions to reserves is where we've been able to top reserves up. So if we looked at the totals at the bottom here, the subtotals on the black line, we have utilised just over £1 million of reserves, and we've added just over 1.6 million. So that's where that net 600k increase in reserves has gone, which I mentioned as part of that revenue underspend paper earlier in the agenda. So just wanted to point that out. In terms of the types of reserves we hold, this top section is all earmarked reserves, and the white ones are all ones that we have control over. So we have decided that we want to put reserves aside for these specific purposes as a leadership board. The two blue ones are earmarked reserves, but they are specifically ring-fenced for their purposes, so we can't use them for other things. So the Technical Fire Safety Reserve is specifically business fire safety grant funding that we receive each year and then spend on the teams that support that work. And the ESMCP reserve is related to the ESN project, which we talked about previously. That balance has remained static for some time, could only be used for that project. They actually have asked, as part of kick-starting that project, they've asked for that money back to then start re-looking at how they're funding it going forward. So we have returned that money in early 25-26. We returned that money in April this year. Below that, we have a PFI equalisation fund. That is something that we hold in relation to the Severn Park site and the PFI arrangement there. So that reserve will be utilised by the end of March 28 when the arrangement comes to an end. We hold a general working balance reserve, so this is to help manage unexpected cash flow fluctuations and things like that. We hold a balance of 1.5 million. And then we have right at the bottom there a capital reserve, and you can see there that our capital reserve is reducing. We've got around 3.3 million at the end of March 25, and we're expecting that balance to be zero thereafter because we're using it to fund our capital programme during 25-26, and then we will need to move to borrowing.
Verity, I think we were told this was going to happen. There is a vehicle about to leave, so maybe we could pause for a few minutes and let them go. So if you wanted to refresh your cups while we do that. Sorry, Verity, we interrupted your flow, didn't we? So do you mind trying again?
That's okay, no problem. So I think I'd got to the bottom of it, kind of explaining the different types of reserves we hold. As part of the requirements of producing a reserve strategy and a reserve summary, we are supposed to forecast our reserve balances out into the future. So we have got an unaudited balance as at March 25, so the caveat there is that's what we expect the balance to be. That links in and agrees to the balances that are published as part of the draft accounts that are out for public inspection at the moment, but they are subject to audit. So should there be any audit adjustments, those might change. And then we forecast the balance out for the next 4 years. Those are forecast in line with our medium-term financial plan, so any movements on those reserves in future years align to any releases from reserves we're assuming in the MTFP. What I will say is that our earmarked reserves, our cash-backed earmarked reserves are reducing. We are not expecting to be able to top up our reserves in future years. We've got significant deficits, so we're therefore not expecting to be in a position where we can add to our reserves. So we do need to be mindful of how we use our reserves and the fact that they can only be used once. In terms of levels of reserves, there's no statutory level of reserve that we have to hold. There's nothing that says or gives us any guidance really on what level of reserve we should hold. But we tend to look at our general reserve, which is our 1.5 million, as our kind of contingency plan reserve. And they kind of recommend that you don't hold more than 5% of your revenue budget in your general reserve. So ours is around 2.5%. I have had a look at other services. It's better to look at them from a percentage point of view rather than a value, and compared, and they vary from between 2% to over 5%, some of them. So we are edging onto the lower end of the scale there. Having said that, we haven't had to dip into that reserve in recent years, so we haven't increased it at this point, but it's something that will remain under review. In terms of the actual reserve strategy, I won't go through it in detail, but it is included for you there in Appendix 1. Most of the bits that I've mentioned in terms of the types of reserves and things like that are defined in there. It also includes information on our statutory requirements in relation to reserve holding and what we need to publish in terms of the reserve strategy. It follows a very similar format to prior year. So really it was more around the detail of the reserves we're holding that I wanted to focus on today. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Verity. Questions? No? We're all happy with it. That's brilliant. Yes. And again, it's the quality of the commentary that has led to that, I believe. So we are asked to approve the reserve strategy, the 2025 to 2029 reserve strategy on Appendix 1, and the summary of reserves in Appendix 2, which includes transfers between reserves proposed as part of the year-end review completed by the Service Leadership Board, and then agree for the approved reserve strategy to be published on the website. As there were no questions, I propose that we do so. May I have a seconder? Tom, thank you. Are there any votes against? Any abstentions? And all those in favour? Thank you, that is approved. Moving on to agenda item 17, which Verity will be pleased it's her last one. The Treasury Management Strategy Review for the year ending March 2025.
Thank you. Apologies. So this one is in some ways the most technical, but in other ways the easiest because there hasn't been much activity. So as part of the SIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management, we are required to publish a Treasury Management Strategy in advance of the financial year, then have a half-year review, and then have a full-year review at the end of the year. So this is to make sure that we're meeting those SIPFA requirements. So this is the full-year review of our Treasury Management activities for the year ending March 2025. The background for this paper just gives an outline of what the SIPFA requirements are and how we're meeting those, so I won't go through those in detail. In terms of financial implications, there's a table on the top of page 93 that I'll just talk through briefly. Actually, before I move on to that, I will just mention, I've previously said we were looking at appointing Treasury Management advisors, given that we know that we're taking on borrowing in future years to fund our capital programme. We have now appointed those Treasury Management advisors, and they have helped us with the format of this paper to make sure that we are meeting all of those SIPFA requirements and that we then continue to do so going forward. So it does look slightly different to some of the other papers we've presented, but it's just because we've had input from professionals. So in terms of this top table, we are summarising here our external borrowing. It's part of our prudential indicators. It highlights really that our borrowing has stayed the same. We've already talked about that a number of times this morning. £7 million is our borrowing. Other long-term liabilities, that includes our PFI liabilities and IFRS 16. And IFRS 16 is something I'll come back to because it affects some of our other indicators as well. But what this table is doing is looking at whether we're under or over borrowed. So it's comparing our external borrowing, so any loans and long-term liabilities we have, compared to our capital financing requirements. So our capital financing requirement is our need to borrow to fund our investments. We're in an under-borrowed position, which is a good thing. It means we've kind of internally borrowed to fund what we need to. If we were looking over-borrowed, it might suggest that we're borrowing to fund our revenue activity, which is something we're not allowed to do. So it's a positive in that we're looking under-borrowed at the moment. We've also got a comparison here to our investments. So our only investments that we have are cash balances. We haven't made any specific third-party investments. So we've got just under 8 million of cash, and then we've just compared here our total external borrowing to our cash to get to a net debt position. As you can see, our net debt position is quite a lot lower than it has been in the prior year, but that's because of our higher cash balance, really. The second table on this page just looks at the maturity structure of the debt portfolio. Our current debt portfolio is just 2 Public Works Loan Board loans, each for £3.5 million. One is maturing in 2030 and one in 2040, so you can just see where they are maturing in terms of timescales. Moving on through into Section 5, the first part of Section 5 is some information that our Treasury Management advisors have provided in terms of the activity and movements in interest rates throughout the year. So I won't talk about that in much detail, apart from to say that the last paragraph really is a bit more forward-looking, and the predictions they have for kind of drops in interest rates over the coming financial year, and how we will try to utilise that to our advantage when we're looking at borrowing decisions. So we'll work with them to make sure that we take all of that information into account. They have provided us with some information on the borrowing rates for Public Works Loan Boards during 24-25. So any loans but we didn't take any out, but had we have done, these are the kind of rates that were available during 24-25. So they're for information only, really. Moving on then to the prudential indicators, which are talked about in paragraph 5.6 and 5.7. We set our prudential indicators at the beginning of the financial year. They are meant to be kind of affordability limits, so to make sure that we don't take on too much borrowing, and the decisions that we make are sustainable and prudent. So if we move to Appendix 1 on page 101, This just presents to you the approved prudential indicators compared to the actual for the year end. So something like capital expenditure at the top there, we should recognise, hopefully. The approved capital programme was just under 5.5 million, but we actually spent just under 2 million, which we've seen in the paper earlier today. There are a number of these indicators, however, that do look higher than we previously set, and that is because of the impact of IFRS 16. I have mentioned IFRS 16 on occasion. It's an accounting standard that affects the way we account for leases. From this, when we set the 24-25 indicators, we didn't know the impact of that conversion to the new accounting standard. We have had to convert. It's a mandatory requirement for 24-25, so we've done that, and that is now reflected in the actual. So we're not really comparing like with like because of that additional information and the impact of that adjustment to IFRS 16. However, there is a paragraph in this paper, paragraph 5.11, which just explains the impact of IFRS 16, and really it's just saying it's a new accounting standard, but it doesn't really have a financial impact overall. It's just the way it's presented. So the charges that go through the revenue account in relation to leases are no different to what they were before. It's just how we present them, which has had an impact on how we present our indicators. So it's not that we're breaching our indicators, because we're not comparing like with like, and it hasn't really had an impact on our financial position. It's just about how it's presented. So there are some, you can see there's increased financing costs there, and there's also some increase in long-term liabilities. And you can see when we look at the breakdown of the capital financing requirement, there's an increase in the capital financing requirement as a result of adopting IFRS 16. So in terms of our full-year review, we have to look at our prudential indicators and see if we've breached them. But what we have to remember here is that we're not comparing like with like. So we haven't breached any of our indicators when we take out the impact of IFRS 16, if that makes sense. The bottom of page 95 talks about the borrowing strategy. So we haven't taken out any new borrowing. We've mentioned that before, which means that we can quite quickly move on to the investment side of the treasury management activity. And again, there's been low activity here, really. So at the bottom of page 97, it talks about our bank balances being managed by Bristol City Council, which we've talked about before. We receive a return on our bank balances, so our surplus cash is pooled with Bristol City Councils, and we receive an amount which is based on the Sterling Overnight Index, less 25 basis points is what Bristol City Council pay us as a return on our bank balances. Apart from that, we haven't made any individual investments with separate counterparties. So the only thing we've done this year is manage our bank account through Bristol City Council. So if we turn over onto page 98, there's a table at towards the top of page 98, which just summarises by quarter the return that we've seen on our cash balances. And we can see we've generated just over £400,000 compared to a budget of 250. So that again links to the revenue paper that I presented the very beginning of this agenda, where I said there's some additional income we've generated from investment income. It's just showing you in a little bit more detail how that was generated throughout the year. So in terms of treasury management activity, we haven't taken on any new borrowing. We haven't done any specific investment. So it's been quite a low activity year. There's a summary at the bottom of page 98, and really it's just to say that we've kind of been able to delay that external borrowing, partly because of rephasing of capital investment and things like that. So we've generated savings in terms of delayed financing costs, but we've also generated some additional returns on any surplus cash because we've held on to cash longer rather than investing it in capital investments. What we will do in the coming year, although this is a backward-looking paper, in the coming year we will be looking at making sure we make the most of any internal borrowing we can first, so utilising what resources we have available in terms of our cash balances before we go to borrowing and incur those costs. So that's what we will look at doing with our Treasury Management advisors going forwards. But really for this year, it's been a low activity year, but just a requirement that we have to report on that activity for you.
Thank you, Verity. And I'll open up for questions. No? Again, you've managed to stun them into silence, so that's good. We're asked to just review the performance in relation to the Treasury Management activities of the authority for 2024-25, including the fourth quarter as set out in this report. So I'll propose that we have done so. May I have a seconder on that? Dan, thank you very much. Any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes in favour? Thank you very much. We'll now move on. You can have a break now, Verity. And we'll move back to Amanda for agenda item 18, which is the annual review of remuneration, which is easy for me to say again, CFO, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my paper starts in your pack at page 107. I should say straight away that normally you get this paper, we're required to present it to you by the end of the financial year, so you normally get it in March. A decision was taken not to present it to you in March because we hadn't had any news about the NJC Pay Award. And so we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for that, and eventually it was announced on the 10th of June 2025. So that's why you've got this paper unusually at your AGM today. So I'll quickly run through the recommendations before explaining a little bit about where we've got to those recommendations. So you're asked to firstly note the NJC Gold Book Pay Award 2025, which is at Appendix 1 and was announced on the 10th of June. Approve the application of the NJC Pay Award as set out in option 2 at paragraph 5.3 for all Service Leadership Board members, and I will explain why that there's a slight anomaly which we need to go through there. C, note the change in pay review date for brigade managers, which will now be the 1st of July each year, which is easier, I think. And also note that the Chief Officer, Chief Executive, does not seek to engage the two-track approach, which allows for an additional local pay award. So I think I shall just assume you've read this paper and jump straight to key considerations at section 5. And refer you to the appendix. Appendix 1 is the letter from the NJC. Sorry, that is at page 111. So that's the letter which made the announcement on the 10th of June. And I've summarised at paragraph 5.1 what it says. So there was an award comprising 3 elements: a one-off 1,500 consolidated uplift on all salaries effective from the 1st of January, so this is backdated. A 3.2% uplift of all salaries effective from the 1st of July, and moving the pay review date from 1st of January to 1st of July. Now, the reason it causes a slight anomaly here is because all members of the Service Leadership Board and the statutory officers, so that includes myself and Verity, are paid a percentage of the Chief Officer's salary. So you have half of the board who are on Gold Book, who are directly mentioned in this award letter because they're serving officers on the Brigade Book pay, terms and conditions of pay. And you have other members of the board, so Director of Corporate Services and statutory officers, who are on Green Book. So there's this that's why it's slightly confusing, okay? And there's 2 ways of approaching the pay award. So if I refer you to paragraph 5.3, you will see there's 2 interpretations to how you approach the £1,500 one-off payment. You either, and I'm looking to Verity to correct me if I get this wrong, but you either apply it to one salary, either chief's salary, and then it trickles down, or you apply it to everyone, and then the pay award at 3.2% is awarded to that figure. Now, the wording in the letter at Appendix 1, if I take you back to that at page 111, says at the first bullet point, a 1,500 consolidated uplift on all salaries and a 3.2% uplift on all salaries. So having discussed this with the Chief Officer and the Statutory Finance Officer, we think the intention is the option at option 2. So in other words, the 1,500 is applied first and then the 3.2 applied. But I'm open to members to call us out on that and to reach a different interpretation. The figures are not hugely different, but option 2 is slightly more expensive to the fire authority. So we've gone with our best bet of what we think NJC were trying to achieve, but we stand open to be scrutinised on that and questioned on that. So that's one matter which I think questions will probably cover. The options are set out on page 109. And the new salaries are also set out, assuming option 2 at paragraph 5.6. Please note that obviously statutory officers are part-time, so it's a pro rata pay for statutory officers. So I think I'll pause there and do my best to answer questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Questions? Robin?
Reading of the NJC letter, it's clearly option 2. That's the intention. And that's the intention, when it applies to local government, to the fire authority or whatever. Unless, of course, as officers, you want to sacrifice some money for the fire authority.
Thanks, Robin. And because there's 2 dates mentioned, and they're different, I tend to concur. Option 2 does appear to be what they were getting at. Anyway, do we have any further questions?
I quickly run through the recommendations then. So the Fire Authority is asked to note the NJC Goldberg Pay Award at Appendix 1, announced on the 10th of June, approve the application of the NJC Pay Award as set out in Option 2 at paragraph 5.3 for all SLB members, note the change in pay review date for brigade managers, which will now be 1st of July each year, and note that the Chief Fire Officer does not seek to engage a two-track approach. Any... Yes, please. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Oh, one abstention. Thank you. That's Cam. Votes in favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Moving on to agenda item 19, which is the appointment of the ACFO, and the Chief will be presenting on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So I bring forward a paper to you today in terms of the appointment of Assistant Chief Fire Officer. I'll read the recommendations, which begins on page 113 of the pack. So I'm seeking from the Fire Authority today to provide me with delegated authority for the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive, to appoint Assistant Chief Fire Officer Paul Lyons as a substantive ACFO to lead the Portfolio Directorate with immediate effect. And I just bring your attention to some key items within the paper, if I may. So in paragraph 1, it provides a summary, and there's 3 bullet points, which, if it's okay, I'll talk you through just in terms of the context of why I'm bringing this paper forward today. So, following the Assistant Chief Officer recruitment process in June 2024, the selection panel and the Chief Officer at the time, Simon Shilton, decided that there were 2 candidates who were appointable. Therefore, rather than lose an exceptional candidate, which is Paula Lyons, Paula was offered a temporary Assistant Chief Officer role to take on service improvement. Now, in response to the Chief Fire Officer at the time's personal objectives to develop a succession plan, the extended temporary Assistant Chief Officer role was extended until the 31st of March 2026, and then took a decision to make the role substantive from the 1st of April 2026 next year. Now, at the personal development review of the Chief Fire Officer on the 19th of March, the members inquired why the appointment was not made substantively straight away. So on that information, as your Chief Fire Officer, I've carried out a review of the structure. I've engaged with the Monitoring Officer and the Clerk, also with the Statutory Finance Officer, and also with our Service Leadership Board to review the position of substantiating the ACFO position with immediate effect. And my conclusion of that review is that I would seek to do that with your delegated authority. So just in terms of the paragraph 3.2, so the Fire Authority must approve any proposed total remuneration in excess of £100,000 per year on appointment of any posts, hence the reason to seek your delegated authority today. And then item 3.3 again clarifies that the Assistant Chief Fire Officer on the 3rd of June 2024, members identified 2 exceptional candidates. So again, a process has already been conducted, and it's already identified that there are 2 appointable candidates as a result of that selection process that was made by the members of that appointment select committee. In terms of the financial implications, which is outlined in paragraph 4.1, so the Assistant Chief Fire Officer pay attracts a salary of £128,756. And then in terms of paragraph 4.2, the funding for the temporary Assistant Chief Fire Officer post has been budgeted to come from the Priority Programme Reserve for 2025-26 of the financial year, and the continuation of this post without reserve funding has been assumed across the 3-year medium-term financial plan. So importantly, I'm not seeking additional finances for this post. It's already been built into the medium-term financial plan, so this is about substantiating the position. Under paragraph 5.1, it just outlines the Portfolio Directorate. So the Assistant Chief Fire Officer provides strategic responsible ownership for some significant transformation elements of our priority programme. So continuous improvement, efficiencies and savings, and we've already seen within this within the meeting today the significant savings that have been produced by the efficiency team that is led by the Assistant Chief Fire Officer. The Programme Management Office, the Business and Project Management Support, we've got special programmes and projects such as Seven Park PFI, and then also is leading on cultural development across the service in line with the HMIC FRS recommendations, which is one of our causes of concern. So again, paragraph 5.2 just outlines the succession management plan, and the Chief Fire Officer, previous Chief Fire Officer, did receive indication from the Assistant Chief Fire Officer Richard Welsh of his intention to retire in February 2027, enabling the Chief Fire Officer to consider succession planning into the future. Now, there's no guarantee that will materialise, but it's a strong indication of intention. Again, 5.4 paragraph just outlines the succession plan objective that's set by the previous Chief Fire Officer in terms of making sure that we've got the continuity in terms of our strategic leadership team to enable the progression of our continuous improvement and transformation work. And just to outline specifically the risks of not appointing a substantive position and losing a very talented member of the Senior Leadership Board, following the HMIC recommendations, we've got 4 causes of concerns and 31 areas of improvement. We are progressing significant efficiencies and savings which have been identified within our medium-term financial plan, and the ACFO for Portfolio Directorate has been leading the embedding and the maturity of a portfolio methodology into the service in order for us to continuously improve as a service. And there are some significant programmes, such as I've mentioned already, Seven Park, also the refurbishment of Bath Fire Station and the refurbishment of Weston-super-Mare Fire Station. So again, there are some significant challenges over the next 2 years in terms of our transformation, and the appointment of the Assistant Chief Fire Officer will provide stability for the individual, for the service, and for our ability to maintain continuous improvement across the organisation. So I open up to any questions, and just to again reiterate paragraph 2.1, which is I'm seeking delegated authority as your Chief Fire Officer to appoint Assistant Chief Fire Officer Paul Lyons as your substantive ACO to lead Portfolio Director with immediate effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And if I could just clarify, I think the temporary appointment was already until the end of March 26, and we're now talking about having an extra ACFO for maybe 8-9 months until Rich steps down. That's good to know. And I having worked as chair with Simon for a brief time, and everybody who's worked with Paula says that we don't want to lose her as a candidate by keeping her on tenterhooks. So I have to say that I am personally in favour of this, but I'll open up for questions. Matthew.
Thank you. It's more of a comment, really. I think earlier in the meeting we heard about the significant challenges going forward, especially around the financial aspect of the Fire Authority, plus all of the list there that's contained in 5.1. So I'm very supportive of this post. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And one other point, I don't know, given your newness, Matt, whether you'll be able to answer this, but have we had a female ACFO before?
I don't believe so, no, but I'm looking to officers to
We
clarify.
had a female deputy.
Deputy. Not an ACFO.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, and obviously goes towards diversity. Dan.
As someone who sat on the recruitment panel, along with Councillor Hardy, I remember when Luke and Paula were brought on board, they're both excellent candidates, and it was very difficult to choose between them, and it went long into the night, the discussion. So I was fully endorsed the decision we made that day, and also sat on the PDR, Simon's PDR as well. So I'm fully supportive of the decision to carry this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. David.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I'd like clarification on about this paper is that there is no intention to have 4 Assistant Chief Fire Officers once ACFO Welsh retires, and congratulations on your retirement, Richard.
I ain't gone yet.
The answer to that is no. The aim will be is it enables us to deliver the transformation work, the continuous improvement, the efficiencies and savings, and then review the structure and then be able to bring that back into business as usual. So the maturity of a methodology for portfolio and transformation is in its infancy within the service, which I acknowledge within the paper. So the additional Assistant Chief Fire Officer to focus on transformation whilst we continue business as usual is essential. The ability then to bring that into business as usual as it matures, I will then review the structure and then look at where I can make efficiencies within that structure.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? No. Okay. So we are asked to provide delegated authority for the Chief to appoint Paula as substantive ACFO, sorry, I'm using somebody else's teeth today, to lead the Portfolio Directorate with immediate effect. I will propose that we provide a said authority. Matthew, seconding. Any votes against? Any abstentions? And all those in favour? Okay. Well, thankfully for everybody, especially those heading off to the LGA conference, and for those who may be heading off to go and sit in the sun in their garden, we've rattled through. We're on agenda item 20. The date of next meeting is Wednesday, the 22nd of October at 1400 hours. At the moment, it's at Seven Park. May that change, or? It will be Seven Park. Okay, so you can all have a lovely summer. We don't need a confidential or exclusion because we've already agreed the confidential minutes.
Can I advertise a couple of things? So you have been ordered a take-out lunch in a take-out bag because some of you are going to the LGA conference. So I understand they were being delivered to reception. So please help yourself to your lunch before you go. For those of you who are not rushing off, the station manager, Anna's he's going to wave at you now. He's very kindly agreed to answer any questions, give you a bit of a talk around what happens here at Weston. I'd really recommend you take her up on that kind offer. It's fascinating. So Anna, thank you very much for that. And finally, my last day, the 31st July, I know I've threatened everyone already, but please, could people come to the member briefing, which starts at lunchtime? It's after the PRC. It's probably your most important member briefing of the whole year because we're going to go into a lot more detail about efficiency and savings plans. So please, I'd love to say goodbye to you all as well, so that'd be fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's just like a birthday party today. You get a little party bag to take away with your lunch, so can't be bad.